Come Back to Me, a poem by Waveform Award-winning singer-songwriter Essex Siri from her new collection, Trapped in Amber. Now available at your local marketplace or online at yangtze.commercehub.linkage. I only remember you in the soft, washed-out vision of a child, a girl barely out of the egg. I remember days filled with noise, in colorless hallways crowded with sour men and recycled air, where every centimeter of dull space was claimed by someone pushing, pressed, and jostling against all the others, until at last I could escape to my shitty little room, in our shitty little complex, on our shitty little asteroid, and while everyone else was asleep and dreaming, I was awake, and my eyes were white. And a very few nights, 1 in 100, 1 in 1,000, while everyone else was asleep and dreaming, I would look out the window and find you looking back at me, a wayward star, flooding my room with amber.
Welcome to The Chimera, a role-playing adventure podcast. This week, we are visiting the world of Ardor, the hub of galactic finance, where hyper-modern metropolises bloom amidst towering and ever-encroaching vegetation. I'm Vin LeBate, and this week, I'm back to playing Sidra, a living financial instrument. Joining me, as always, are Jeffrey Bard, Braden Lamb, Kacey Smith, Kelly Wiseman-Ashbooth-Jackson, and our inimitable game master, Josh Hall-Bachner, who is going to start talking now. Oh, wait, not quite yet. I just wanted to add one more small note. In about a minute, I'm going to mention Angkor Wat, but what I'm actually thinking of is the nearby temple of Ta Prohm, which you should definitely go look up. Okay, Josh can go now.
So, I think we'll begin here on the planet of Ardor in a, in the middle of the nice season, I suppose. I don't think that there's really a particularly bad season here, but the sun is particularly shiny and the trees are particularly, I don't remember, bluish green? Am I right there?
They're mostly green. They're just very large and dense.
Mm-hmm. So I'm hoping, Vin, that you can kind of give us a quick picture of what, one of the central treasury buildings looks like, where you would kind of expect Sidra to have originally emerged from.
So the treasury vaults are fairly isolated. There are some in the major cities, but a lot of them tend to be out in the woods because they're built into very old structures. So from the outside, it looks like kind of almost like an Angkor Wat situation with a lot of stone things that look like temples, but that are grown through with heavy vegetation, large trees. But then once you go inside, the upper levels are, and maybe a little more temple looking, but also sort of office-y. And then they've been built down very heavily. So the farther down you go, you're going through layers of technical spaces, research facilities, bureaucratic facilities, all that kind of stuff.
Cool. Okay. So in one of the kind of office kind of hallways in that upper area, one that has windows that kind of look out onto the outdoors. It's quiet for a moment, and then coming around one corner, an Ardori lady, dressed in the official, robes of those who actually represent the treasury, comes tearing around one corner, a sheaf of papers held in one hand, running at absolute, top speed, and muttering to herself, shit, 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 shit. We'll cut away from there for a moment, come back. Elsewhere, we find ourselves on the bridge of a vessel known as the Thylacine, a rather small, unassuming, cramped cargo-y type ship, where there are two individuals currently sitting here in this kind of cockpit area, navigating, knowing that they are well on their way towards a rendezvous in order to take on, their latest job. So if you guys could describe yourselves real quickly.
So I'm playing Vale, who is, they're both this species called Usko. They're these reptilian guys, or reptilian gender-shifting creatures. And Vale is sitting in one of the chairs and has on this lightweight suit that kind of is emitting sort of a reddish glow from around the neck and kind of where the arms connect to the shoulders, and a little bit you can see on the chest. It's sort of like this meshwork going across their skin, and they're watching sort of this screen with one eye which is pointed in that direction, and the other eye is just sort of pointed down and reading some readouts, kind of like on a smaller screen in front of the chair. And their tail is sort of draped around one of the arms of the chair and then curled around it a couple times. They're sort of at the moment, like a greenish color.
And I'm playing Crux. Crux has the slightly nicer of the two suits. The light and heat leaks out through patterned holes going all down the limbs and the body. And Thon is currently hanging out on the ceiling. From one foot. The other foot is holding a little data pad, and the two hands are also holding data pads, and the eyes are sort of lazily drifting between the three.
Cool. Well, you are well on your way towards a rather small galactic outpost, essentially, a place that's called the Hath Border Station, which is basically just basically the equivalent of a rest stop along one of these kind of backwater, finger world chains. You're maybe 3 or 4 jumps off of the spine here, and this is basically just a place that people kind of come to stop, maybe refuel on the way out to, Galactic Utica, essentially. So
it's like one of those truck stops that you pull off on,
yep.
And there's really nothing there but like a McDonald's Taco Bell merged.
Yep, pretty much.
Yep, that describes Utica.
So you're supposed to meet somebody there. They've got a signal, but you don't really know that much else about them. But you have kind of secondhand indications that this job will probably pay pretty well. Anything you want to cover before you head in, or are you just going to dock?
I think we're okay to dock. Anything you wanted to hit on, Braden?
Oh, I don't know. Did we want to go over the plan? I know you do.
Well, I feel like we've been through it a few times, but sure, let's hit it one more time, because something is inevitably going to go wrong, and it's nice to have figured out what ahead of time. So we meet our contact, and we get some better specifics on what it is they're promising and how much they're going to pay for it, and hopefully we get out of this little crap bag of a pocket of space and somewhere more interesting with a few more moats.
Right. And you calculate the risk and calculate the reward.
That's how we do it.
Okay. Crux puts away the 3 data pads, all of which were just watching Moonpig videos, and with the tail pulls out a 4th one that has the actual plans and calculations.
Bill takes Thon data pad sort of off from where it's been attached onto the chair, and attaches it to the sleeve of Thon's suit instead, which is in sort of a heat protected pocket so it doesn't melt.
Okay.
And Crux is just gonna dangle the other one from the tail.
So I think at this point they dock and get ready to disembark.
So you come in, and this place is kind of dingy even by like galactic truck stop standards. Very poorly cleaned. The air smells particularly stale. It's clear that some species with rather high levels of deposits left behind have been through some of these docking ports without somebody really coming through to clean them up. So there's kind of dried, slime and other fluids in various places. It doesn't really smell that good. As you come into the more, central area, most of the, establishments here are closed down. You're kind of here on an off cycle. So the only place that's still open is the Kingsome Shopping Town Smilodon's concession stand / Kinetic Croc, which is a regional space quote unquote restaurant.
Yeah, it's a croc, all right.
Is a Kinetic Croc like the local equivalent of the Instapot?
No, it's an animal that you can eat.
Oh, okay.
Oh.
Yeah, croc with CROC. Sorry.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
And for the record, the ship is the thylacine, like the Tasmanian tiger, right?
That is indeed exactly correct.
Yes.
Awesome.
Yeah. So this place is open, but the whole place has kind of an open food courty vibe. There's a lot of tables. There's what look to be probably a couple drunks passed out at a few of the tables near the restrooms over at one side, but most of these are pretty empty and it's pretty dead. There's one presumably like teenaged alien of some stripe who's supposed to be working behind the counter at the open restaurant, but is actually just there kind of like poking at like a floating hologram of a musical performance occasionally and ignoring anybody else around. So it's pretty dead here.
Is there at least a Koi Quadras?
There is, but it is closed.
Oh.
Okay.
So Vale heads over to the Kinetic Croc and kind of reads the sign and just mutters under Thon's breath, "Barbarians." Heads in.
It's funny because it's reptile meat.
Yeah, Crux follows.
Okay. So are you guys just gonna kind of sit down or hover ominously or what?
We're gonna look around and see if anyone's already there.
Okay.
That might be the person that we're supposed to meet. Otherwise, I guess we'll take a table.
Okay. So you kind of poke around. The actual seating inside the kind of dedicated space here is not particularly different than what there is outside, but it is within kind of technically the confines of the restaurant, so it's kind of colored and branded to match, but otherwise not really particularly distinct. There are, however, these kind of like fake kind of wood grain panels that kind of separate stuff out. So there's kind of aisles of tables instead of one big open area. And you are probably able to see on the wavelengths here that would allow you to see the kind of like overly elaborate kind of cartoon franchise mascot art that's been kind of drawn up on these and in kind of, paint that would not register on human vision. So that just kind of makes the whole place look more garish and absurd. At first, it doesn't seem like anyone is nearby. However, as you kind of go up and down, you finally manage to kind of come around a corner and find a table that is occupied by somebody that you're pretty sure you actually missed going the opposite direction. Somebody who you would clock as an Ardori based on their appearance, though it's not tremendously detailed, and wearing a completely featureless black cloak, sitting very calmly, basically not moving at one of the tables near the back of the restaurant.
So I guess we head in that direction and sit down at the table, and Vale says, "That's not conspicuous at all."
I endeavor to keep a low profile except when necessary.
Well, I think what Thon was saying is, you look very suspicious.
And yet, who is here? He gestures widely with his hands. I take it you are Crux.
Oh, yeah. I'm Crux. Nice to meet you. Thon extends a hand to shake.
Yeah, he reaches out, he shakes it. You may call me Mr. Stone.
It's a solid name.
Oh.
I represent a rather extensive organization, and in my dealings across the galaxy, I have come to be aware of your reputation. When I sought out an Inquisitor for this particular effort, you did consistently come up high in the rankings of everyone I spoke to. So do know that you are on this job because you have come highly recommended.
Hot.
We know we're exceptional, but thank you.
Hot, hot, hot.
The offer is as thus. He takes out an actual physical piece of paper, which is kind of crinkly and rustly, kind of a little bit, yellowed, but it doesn't it seems like it should be disintegrating, but it's not. It's very, it's got a high level of kind of stability, I guess, which he takes out and kind of pushes across the table, which is kind of written up as this old style kind of contract. The payment here will be a total of 50,000 motes, 1/3 up front, 2/3 on successful delivery. The target will not be revealed until the acceptance of the contract, at which point penalty clauses will kick in if you attempt to resist or refuse the assignment at that time.
At the first mention of the number, Crux's other eye suddenly focuses so that both are focused on Mr. Stone. Then Thon does a little bit of calculation.
Vale kind of looks down at the paper with one eye and keeps the other eye on Stone, and reads through whatever is written down there.
The contract is pretty straightforward. It's written in legalese, but not particularly obfuscated legalese. It basically says a more flowery and a little bit more ironclad version of what he's just said. There's an upfront payment, but you are heavily committed to delivering something within a pretty broad range, which is basically just acquiring, an object of significance and delivering it to him or a designated representative that he identifies within, a fairly long but finite time frame. Otherwise there start to be significant monetary and otherwise penalties.
How, usual or unusual is this type of contract in their line of work?
It's a little bit simpler than you're used to, honestly. A lot of the time with this, there's stuff, one, there's a lot of legal wrangling because people are trying to like work out the details. So either something is an above board job, right? And in that case, usually it's very complicated. People kind of try to get advantage over each other. They hire, sleazy excess lawyers and try to like work out like secret little like contractual loopholes to like benefit themselves and everything. Or it's, it's an illicit job, in which case usually people avoid legal paperwork altogether, but there's all kinds of like elaborate processes for like, all these like drug deal meetings and like couriers and all this other bullshit that you have to deal with in order to kind of provide the same level of security for the deal that you'd have through the law if it was legitimate. This one is presented like it's a legitimate deal, but the person offering it to you does not seem to be worried about trying to like nickel and dime this situation to their benefit.
Okay.
So either they're hyper confident, or they are not like really worried about the immense amount of money that they're paying you for this, or both.
Okay, so Vale's gonna read the contract over and sort of drum Thon's fingers on the table, but there's only two, so it's not very quick. And it doesn't take very long. And it's going to look over at Crux, and, well, one eye's going to shift from the paper to Crux, and the other eye's going to stay on Stone. So when Thumb speaks, it's a little bit hard to tell who they're addressing at first. And Vale says, "We'll take your job, but I want to double the price."
He kind of stares at you, largely unemotive, for a second. Seems like he's kind of considering something. Then he snatches the paper back. In his other hand, he kind of makes like a little gesture, and suddenly there's a pen in it. He kind of flattens it horizontally in a section over on his side of the table, and he kind of goes at the contract. So the pen that he's writing it in, it's kind of like a crimson red, the ink. And he kind of goes through, crosses out a few lines, including the price, puts in a notification that the total amount is going to go up to, to double what he originally proposed, makes a few, relatively conspicuous edits on the penalty section, drops the total amount of delivery time available, like the final deadline, in half. And then he goes down to the bottom where there's a little section that says Agent Legion Stone, representing the interests of Galactic Collections, LLC. Signs and a little flourish, pushes it back across the table to you. He does not provision the pen to you. He wants you to use your own pen.
Vale's tongue is just going to snap out to try and grab the pen and pull it over.
It's gone. It's gone. Like he does a little, hand motion.
It disappears.
A little prestidigitation.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. If you've like seen the bit that the guy does on Penn and Teller's Fool Us, where they're like, "I don't even know how you disappeared the pen." That's kind of the routine that he's doing here.
That was a really satisfying
win. It really is.
Okay, well then Vale's going to fish out some sort of writing utensil and look over the contract again, make note of all of the changes.
Yeah, Crux is looking at it as well, and like one eye keeps shifting over to Vale to kind of check in, and I think we can do that.
The eye looking at Crux just kind of winks, and Vale signs.
At the exact moment that you finish your signature, there's basically kind of almost a flash of reddish white light off of the paper, and kind of a sigil that kind of has like an eye at the center with kind of various squiggly lines and everything around it, kind of flashes briefly into existence as if it's kind of like commemorating the signing of the paper, and then is gone almost as quickly as it appeared. And there's the faint smell of blood.
How very theatrical.
Neat.
He reaches one finger across, pulls the contract over, rolls it up with one hand and disappears it essentially the same way as the paper.
Well, then, now that all the formalities are taken care of, would you like to tell us what we're retrieving for you?
So here's what you'll be getting, he says, and leans over. And at that moment, Jeff just got up again, didn't he?
Yeah.
I want to cut back over. But let's wait a second for him to come back.
Listeners, it should be noted that Jeff has spent most of this call thus far bouncing up and down to try and get his baby to go to sleep. And it has not been very effective on the baby, but it has been very effective on me. So bear that in mind as you hear this.
So I think where we'll set our scene here is somewhere deep within the Treasury building, in a chamber that, is relatively rarely used except for one very specific purpose, which it is currently being put to. Along all the outskirts, there's a wide variety of dusty old books, kind of ledgers and books of financial law and all kinds of other boring things that you would tend to associate with the process of finance. Filing cabinets full of old paper contracts, a variety of kind of computer terminals, and so on and so forth. Spread throughout are just tipped over stacks and stacks of moat chips, the standard size ones that people generally use to exchange currency, as well as bank only moats, which are, I think, basically like discs the size of like a CD with probably 5 individual moat lights inside. So there's just thousands of these, each with 5 purple dots on it, just tipped over everywhere. Giant stacks of cash, just, here and there, left completely askew. At the very center of the room, there is a chair, not particularly elaborate or fancy in any way, but it does tilt sort of like a dentist's chair, and it does have straps like the particularly scary kind of dentist's chair. Strapped into it with, currently in what appears to be an unconscious state is a single individual, broadly looking like an Ardori, but a little bit different. Vin, if you would give us an idea of what Sidra would have looked like at this stage.
Probably about the same. Shorter hair, I would imagine. But still with the same markings. Probably in this state, the photocytes in her skin are sort of pulsing rhythmically, and not like usually they're fairly like they don't tend to show up too much and then flicker. But now they're almost like breathing,
like a sleep button.
Yes,
on the computer.
Yes,
it might be exactly like that.
There are a few machines hooked up to her in a way that you'd kind of expect in a medical context, but each of these is just a little bit different. There's, she's filled up with all kinds of tubes and electrodes and everything, just like you'd expect for somebody who's kind of under medical surveillance. There's a big monitor display that is kind of filling the role that you'd get in, a human hospital with something like an EKG, but instead of heartbeats or anything, it's basically a stock ticker. And on the other side, there's something hanging up kind of overhead with a pipe and also an electrode that kind of run down from it to her, kind of in the position that you'd get with, like an IV bag. But instead of an IV bag, it's a little electronic device with a coin op slot on it. So, when various people have been on attending here, they've kind of, filled that up, hit the button to allow it to kind of drip in as new capital is being slowly infused into the realized asset. So that's at the center. And for the most part, the room is quiet now, but off to one side are two individuals that I'll allow the players to describe now.
So the first of these individuals is Kasum. Kasum is wearing the robes of the Inner Treasury and has a bald pate, but where hair might otherwise be, has three asymmetrical planes of glowing something. So the surface of his scalp just glows with a medium white blue light. He has a pair of pince-nez spectacles with rectangular lenses with no frames, which are also blue, although a much brighter clear blue, and a look of concern and discomfort on his face.
Standing with her arms crossed and one foot on top of the other is Kajum, if that's the pronunciation we're going with. And she is also completely shaven. She has no hair anywhere. And she has her eyes closed in a very sort of pensive, like almost like she's trying to listen for something, but can't quite hear it. And she wears the robes of the she's inner treasury? Are you inner treasury?
She's outer.
Outer treasury.
No.
She wears
She's outer.
Yeah. The robes of the outer treasury. And she says, "Is it time yet?"
Kasum gives a quick shake of the head.
Then we continue to wait.
Moments after Kasum's head shake, one of the doors to this area opens up, and a set of three individuals in inner treasury robes, although clearly from every indication significantly lower ranking than either of the other individuals here, come in. In the forefront is a male Ardori of rather diminutive stature, carrying a relatively large stick with a single mote coin kind of attached to the top end of it.
Mm-hmm.
The two behind him, each looking like they're carrying nothing, but with each of their hands wrapped in kind of a almost bandage of a translucent, slightly shimmering material, which anybody used to the treasury would recognize as essentially a weapon that makes use of monetary force, essentially, to enable people to fight more effectively. So they kind of wander over to the two of you. The gentleman in the forefront kind of stomps his staff on the ground, and he says, "Checking in."
We are still waiting. The light would have changed colors by now, if we wanted you here. So leave.
He seems a little taken aback by the curtness of this response, but he has no obvious response. He blinks twice and he says, "As you wish," bows slightly, tilting the staff to the side as he does, signals to the other two individuals, and turns around to go back out the door. As they pass through, you can hear the door shutting, and at a slightly greater distance, the sounds of the individuals basically settling themselves on the other side of the door.
That happened faster than I wanted it to. Do you think they know?
Kasum grimaces and squints. That's his only answer.
I agree. She opens her eyes. All the things she had said before were with her eyes closed. She had not moved from her pose. And she kind of makes her way over to where some of the more the motes that are hanging out, the disc motes. And she grabs basically like 5 or 6 of them, and hides them in the folds of her sleeves. And she says, "Well, we might as well be ready, right?"
Kasum nods in agreement and takes a few of the mote discs himself.
And she kind of goes over to where all of the stock market thing is and just starts checking all of everything to see where the state of things are. Can you hear me yet? No, of course you can't.
All of the vitals appear to be basically as expected. By the current schedule, the actual first conscious awakening of this particular realized asset would still be about a week out.
Okay.
But that generally involves kind of a safety margin capital infusion, which is generally what's going to be happening shortly after the current period. So that Sidra's loaded up enough that as necessary you can certainly flip the switch. As you're studying all of that, the MoteNet communicator that Kasum carries gives a little inaudible beep and buzz.
Kasum grunts and then looks down at the device.
There's a message, lightly coded, but nothing that he can't work out just, in his own head. Basically says, operation is go, merchandise to be delivered at, this location, a spot outside of the Treasury District, maybe about 2 miles by foot, at the specified time. Something that would be about 2 hours from now. Look for the sign of the 6-legged ground animal. You'll be meeting 2 individuals to make the transfer. No other information.
Kasum looks over at Kajum and catches her eye, gives a quick, curt nod, and starts unhooking the equipment so that the asset can be transported.
Kajum goes to the double doors out front and kind of listens against them to see if our friends are still out there.
You hear the guards kind of mumbling back and forth to each other a little bit, but nothing particularly interesting. They're still there.
And these guys are really low level, or like kind of mid level, or
they're security grunts.
They're security grunts.
You've got 2 guys who are literally assigned to watch the door here in case somebody tries to come in from the outside.
Mm-hmm.
And a middle management type coordinator guy who's decided to insert himself into the security detail because he thinks that he's more important than he really is.
I see. So Kajum kind of watches Kasum unhook everything, and just as about a minute before he's completely done, she takes a deep breath, centers herself, cracks open the door just a little bit so that she can slide out between the 2, and then closes the door extremely quietly behind her. So she's hanging out in the hall right now. And she looks with a really pissed off face at the guards, and she kind of like the hush, whisper, yell kind of thing. You are making far too much noise for the period in the process that we are at right now. Get out of this area now. I want you at least 300 feet down that hall. And don't make a noise.
The one guard turns as if he's about to speak, and the middle management individual whacks him in the teeth with the end of his staff.
Does that make a noise?
No, not really. Lightly, but enough to be insulting.
Okay.
The individual stops and rubs his mouth rather than continue to speak. And the central guy kind of signals over elaborately with his hands, fingers to the eyes, pointing back and forth, some kind of weird like sign language that doesn't really mean anything, but he thinks it's cool to, kind of act like this is a big crazy thing. Signals them. The guards follow him down the hall and around a corner.
As they're leaving, she again whispers, "If I hear so much as a fart, you'll have to deal with me, and you don't want that to happen." And then then as she slides back through the double doors. And at this point, Kasum should be done unhooking everything.
Indeed, he is, and holding the asset in a fireman's carry.
And I assume like we are so in tune, like it's kind of almost as she slips back in through the doors, he's walking out and she kind of holds the door back open for him. So it's all like one continuous, sinuous move.
Mm-hmm.
I have no idea where to go now. But we know we're going out the temple. Are we in the inner temple or outer temple?
Inner.
Yeah.
So Kasum would lead from this point.
Yes. So Kasum flows smoothly out past Kajum and goes in the opposite direction of the way the guards have gone, and begins winding sort of through the back route out of the inner treasury section. So I think the idea is that there's only one real entrance and exit, but there are different ways to reach it from within the building. And so he's sort of taking the back stairs version of that approach.
Okie doke. At that moment, I'm gonna cut across to the other group for a moment.
Mm-hmm.
So you guys have received your instructions, and you've been directed to the same, meeting point that we just saw the other two get a message about. In order to get there, you've had to land your ship some distance off. Park it somewhere. Pay somebody to watch over it for you, and basically had to trek out not into the jungle, but into basically kind of the I don't know what you would call it, but an area that's been cleared for walking with kind of the plant repellent stone, but with individual pathways and kind of small plateaus that cut through the jungle. You're kind of in a spot that is surrounded by vegetarian. Like the feeling is kind of like almost an outdoor arboretum, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. Everything you're walking on is nice, like fully defined paths with little benches and signposts and everything. But just outside it, like barely kind of being held at bay by this, is this like incredible like rainforest type vegetation.
So Vale is walking along the path, but Thon's eyes keep kind of traveling up the trees, and every so often Thon's tail will just sort of curl around an outreaching branch and then has to be uncurled, but it'll like grab onto the next one. Like Thon would really like to be arboreal, but knows that that's just not the fastest way to get where they're going.
And Crux is also walking along, kind of marveling at these trees. Occasionally points a tiny little gun up toward them, and as Thon's finger touches the trigger, the contacts in Crux and Vale's eyes turn slightly dark in preparation for a light show.
Okay. As you guys are kind of preparing yourselves here, other members of your crew have been off kind of getting their own pieces of this puzzle ready. And at this moment, one of them, somebody that you would have expected to be a ways off getting a different piece of the process set up, kind of bounds into view. This is the technician and fixer from your crew, a Morgat individual by the name of Elvin Sandanderson, who has been running some of the monitoring as you guys get ready. He comes over and he goes, "Okay, bosses, you might want to check in with the internal communications. There's something going on that we did not account for."
Of course there is. So Vale will listen in. Sorry, I'm trying to type and talk at the same time. Somehow that just never works. So Vale will sort of tune in and turn up the volume loud enough that Crux can hear as well.
Okay, so you've got a tap on one of the internal communication channels of the Treasury. Not one of the most top secret ones, but basically an internal kind of coordination logistics channel, something that all the people handling kind of basic security or other kind of like management jobs like that would be speaking on. And so you get to overhear a set of them basically announcing all personnel to landing pad C. Repeat, central personnel to landing pad C. The vessel of the auditor is arriving. We have 15 minutes. Repeat, the vessel of the auditor is arriving.
Would anyone who isn't Ardori or a member of the Treasury know what that means?
Well, you might not have like a ton of like intricate details about what the process exactly is here, but you are basically looking at somebody who operates outside of the kind of two Treasury process. Basically kind of a combination of a CPA and a hermit holy man, somebody who basically goes around to different treasury vaults and other kind of segments of the Ardori economy and does surprise inspections, makes sure that things are on the up and up, offers kind of like vague mystical guidance as to the futures of the markets or the expected behavior of certain subsections of the Treasury, and then kind of wanders on to their next spot. So the 15-minute warning is about as much as anybody would tend to expect for this.
Well, that's wonderful.
If any of you break out binoculars or something, you can see kind of a small, single person occupancy, basically like little skiff cutting across the sky, heading straight towards the Treasury vaults.
Crux points Thon's gun at it. Just give me the word.
I think that's going to be more trouble than it's worth, buddy. Let's get to the meat point and hope our contacts have hauled ass.
Man, I was hoping this would be a fun one.
Okay, so cutting back over to inside the Treasury, Kasum is moving through the hallways just as previously discussed when the same message that we just heard broadcasts over the local transmission network. The auditor's vessel is arriving.
So up to this point, Kasum has been leading the way, but with Kajum running interference. So he's just been moving quickly and smoothly while Kajum clears any potential obstacles and sort of, makes the fact that he's carrying out both, a person-shaped thing. That's somewhat probably noticeable, and then also an incredibly valuable object at the same time, and making sure that all that doesn't get them immediately stopped and the whole plan ruined. So when that announcement comes over the PA, there's a moment of a shared look between them, and Kasum breaks into a run.
All right, that shared look is understood, and Kajum breaks into a run as well, matching step for step. Kasum, it's almost as if they're marching, but at a very crazy pace. But all of their movements are extremely fluid and almost graceful. As she runs, she pulls out in one hand each 2 discs, 2 of those mote discs, and she kind of runs with both of them kind of sort of palmed, concealed in her hand, but they're ready for anything to come at them. As soon as they make their way from the inner treasury to the outer treasury, that's when she'll start leading the way through.
Okay. So you reach the outer treasury. The change in decor here is mostly kind of one of degree rather than a fundamental style. The outer treasury is a little bit less practical, a little bit more ostentatious. Kind of the same way that you'd expect at a bank building when you're kind of moving from the internal areas where they have to actually like store all of the money and files and everything, to the kind of rotunda where they just have all the pillars and everything to kind of demonstrate the like opulence and success of the business. But it's no less kind of circuitous and labyrinthine. There are a lot more personnel just kind of randomly roaming the halls in this section. So that seems to be, that's a pretty significant element to kind of try to address if you're trying to move through here with any kind of secrecy.
Most of this, I don't think we have an option for secrecy. Nod yes, Kasum, if you agree. So as they run through and as Kajum is taking the lead, anytime that she sees one person or 2 persons or 3 persons, she kind of like hyper engages them and distracts them in the sense that like she runs up to them and she puts her arms around 2 of them and kind of like walks them down the hall with some small talk, and then pushes them forward as Kasum runs behind her and they're not looking, and then she like disengages and runs up again and kind of is doing this the whole way through, trying to like distract at every point to give Kasum a straight way through.
Awesome. Okay. Yeah. So, this is probably a routine that, although she's rarely practiced this with nearly this much on the line, it's probably pretty familiar to her. I imagine that kind of glad handing her way through the staff of the outer treasury is probably a big part of how she kind of gets what she needs to get done day to day. So a lot of these individuals, I imagine she even has kind of a little routine that she can call, or a name that she can bring up or something.
And the same little small talk that they always do.
Yep. The incredibly boring banker small talk that they always do. So you're able to kind of cut through a few hallways. You see probably like 6 or 7 different individuals, and you kind of offset step get through this. You grab somebody, and then Kasum and carrying Sidra kind of gets through that segment and onto the next, and kind of waits it out for you to kind of pass that person off, go ahead and meet up with the next one. And this is going pretty well so far. You say goodbye to the latest person and kind of start to move on when you realize that you are hearing some conversation from around the corner. It sounds like multiple different people talking, and at first not voices that you actually recognize.
Sigh. That is the only way forward, though?
It's pretty much the only way through from where you are, yeah.
All right. Well, then I'll continue on through and past it in a very sort of uh, like assertive kind of way, like walking briskly around the corner with maybe my eyes closed, thinking hard, and ready to bump into whoever it is.
Okay. So you come around the corner. You see that the people you're hearing are a little bit further down than you might have expected. It seems like they're talking pretty loudly. At the center of the group, you see an individual, a rather tall Ardori, a woman, elderly looking, kind of, frayed ends to her hair, kind of the typical geometric patterns, kind of a little rounded off at the edges, in a way that is kind of equivalent to what you'd kind of think of as like wrinkles or something on a human face. She is clad in something like treasury robes, but these are just solid black with kind of a labyrinthine white line pattern covering them. You've seen these before. You know that there's the way that these are built. There's actually a single line here that's bent all over this one continuous piece of cloth in such a way that it looks like it's a maze, but it's all actually kind of one piece. She's talking to a set of kind of low level outer treasury flunkies and various kind of members of a receiving crew here. As you kind of come around the corner, you hear her basically saying, "Yes, I'm just here to make a standard inspection. I understand that there is a realized asset under development here, and I figured it was only proper for me to check in with the Treasury bond here, see how their process is going, make sure that everything is on the up and up, of course. It should be a very basic inspection."
So
her saying this, she begins to turn her head towards the side of the hallway that you're coming down.
Okay. I guess. So I'll continue on as I was going. I'm going to try to look really distracted, like I don't see her at all, knowing that she's going to see me, but pretending like she can't, and just kind of mutter to myself, "Shit, shit, shit," and kind of doing it in a loud enough way that she's going to hear me, but it sounds like I'm trying to keep it quiet. And then I'll look up and make eye contact with her, and then pretend like I didn't recognize her, and then walk on off into, I don't know, like another room or hallway.
She sees you kind of turn away, and she kind of narrows her eyes a little bit, and in a rather suddenly lower tone than she's been speaking before, she says, "Treasurer Kajum."
I just keep walking like I don't hear her.
She kind of watches you for about 3 steps. She kind of leans over and whispers something inaudible to one of the individuals kind of in the area around her, and then holds one hand up and snaps. And the sound of the snap is like 10 times louder than you'd expect, somebody to normally do. You don't know if it's like amplified or if she just like has, fingers that strong, but it's like a loud, almost thunder crack of a snap. And you can't help but just kind of like almost be jarred by it a little.
All right, I stop completely in my steps and slowly turn around.
She kind of begins to almost glide over to you at a kind of slow, sauntery pace.
And the kind of distressed face that Kajum was wearing before kind of transforms into this really gentle, superficial smile. And she does the customary greeting to I forgot what is her post name? The adjudicator.
Was what?
The adjudicator. The
Auditor.
To the auditor, as obsequious as possible, and smiles and says, "Oh, auditor, what brings us the pleasure? and she's trying to like kind of grab her attention, trying to consume it.
She leans in a little bit. She goes, as you know, I am aware of all of the high volume financial dealings across the planet of Ardor. And of course, it is my holy responsibility to have a full and deep understanding of the goings on with each of these transactions. I understand that this particular treasury outpost is currently in the process of developing a realized asset. And according to the records, I believe that you, Treasurer, are one half of the treasury bond managing this particular asset. Is that correct?
That is correct. Kasum, my partner, is actually with the realized asset now.
Perfect, she says, kind of brings her hands together. All the better then. I imagine you can lead me on, and we can all have a conversation about this at the same time.
Of course. I was just getting some refreshments. It's been a long couple of days, and we needed to recoup our losses, I guess to say.
She kind of looks at you a little bit. If you want to imagine the expression that she's making here, just, kind of think Superintendent Chalmers in the steamed hams bit. Like, she's immediately suspicious of what's going on with you, but she really has no idea why, so all that she really has is just general purpose suspicion. She goes, yes, refreshments. Please. And she gestures broadly with one hand.
So, during all of this, I was lingering back around the corner, right? Kasum was lingering back around the corner. So, at the point where Kajum has made it past the auditor and there were two other people with her, right?
Yep.
The point at which Kajum has made it past the auditor and the two other people, so that everybody's turned to face Kajum. I'm looking around, Kajum was looking around the corner, seeing that everybody else is, except for Kajum's back is to him. He leans out, and with the arm that isn't holding Sidra over his shoulder, he pulls out of his robe just far enough for Kajum to see the glint of the pistol that's in it. And gives her a look, like, should I or shouldn't I?
She as she's talking to the auditor, she just nods once at something that she says, and she has the two mote discs still palmed in her hand.
At the nod, Kasum shoots the auditor in the back.
Okay.
As Kasum,
this got wild real quick.
As Kasum shoots the auditor in the back, she flips up the two mote discs and does this sort of jumping, spinning crescent kick at both of them, kicking one disc at the one toady and another disc at the other toady, and then lands as if she's going to continue walking, or does continue walking.
Okay, yeah, I mean, you can take the toadies out almost instantaneously here. The auditor keels forward from the shot and looks up at Kajum here, reaches up kind of one pointy finger and says, "This is a severe violation," and then drops dead.
I'm sure the balance sheet will read 0 after we're done.
Jeez.
And then we continue walking towards the entrance. We want to get out of here.
Okay.
Yep.
Cut back to the other side. So, Crux and Vale, what are you guys doing with the piece of information that you just got?
That the auditor was there, or that...
Yeah, you know that something is kind of going sideways here, but you don't really have a lot more details than that.
Well, so have we made it to the prearranged meet point yet?
Yeah, you were at the prearranged meet point when you got that information.
Okay.
Then I think probably we'd try to go scope out where the ship landed. and after that, if there's not much activity, start to, well, let's say Crux starts to edge toward the main entrance.
Okay. So it's the area that you're in, like I said, it's kind of surrounded by this kind of jungle plant life. But you don't have to go that far. It's only a small portion of the distance from where you are to the actual treasury building before you can kind of come out of the clearing almost and get to a spot where it's basically just kind of small kind of urban buildings, and then kind of a fairly broad open road that kind of leads up to the treasury building. So you can get a pretty good look at it here. You can, by the time that you get there, you can see that the vessel in question has landed on the roof. There's there doesn't seem to be any kind of like living activity around it right now. So it's, it looks empty. So it seems like everybody has kind of disembarked from it at the moment. And you're in the process of kind of looking at that when kind of almost out of the corner of your eye, almost the whole way across the out of your other eye,
one of my
swivels
eyes.
to look
I just made a
at this.
For the listeners, I just made a motion with my fist on my forehead, shifting around to indicate an eye. Shifting focus.
One of the kind of outcroppings on basically the opposite corner of the building, suddenly and without any particular prompting, explodes.
Whoa, neat.
Well, I guess this is going to be fun after all. I think we should get in there.
Yeah. I've always wanted to see the inside of the treasury.
I've always wanted to rob it.
Yeah, let me be clear. I wanted to see the inside of it and then see the outside of it.
Okay, so you guys are gonna head off in that direction?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So we're gonna cut back to inside the treasury. There's nobody else in the hallway where you guys are at this point. The three that you've got, they're gone. So you temporarily are kind of in a quiet spot again here. So what's your next move?
Kajum will recenter herself, and then continue to walk towards the entrance, wherever that might be.
Okay. You leaving the bodies out?
Yeah, I think so.
Kasum, not letting down the asset, does take a knee by the auditor and take the time to close her eyes, looking soulful about it. But then, yes,
very respectful.
Leaves the bodies where they fell and continues to rush to the exit.
Okay. So, who's carrying Sidra at this point?
Still Kasum.
Okay. You rush to the exit shortly past the section that you're at. The hallways start to split and open up again. All of a sudden, you've got kind of multiple options in terms of how you can maneuver in order to get towards the entrance. So you're no longer kind of gated down the same way. You basically reach that point, and you can, through a variety of mechanisms, kind of figure out a pretty safe pathway for the most part that will allow you to get, you believe, all the way to the exit without, running into anybody else. And you're just beginning to move along that when you both hear, more muffled for you since you're indoors and it's a ways away from where you are, the explosion that Crux and Vale just saw outside as a portion of the building is basically blown off.
The explosion is not part of the plan? That's my question.
It doesn't seem like.
Okay. It wasn't something
it wasn't part of your part of the plan anyway.
All right, then I give a knowing look to Kasum, or actually a questioning look. It's not a knowing look at all. I think we both stop for a moment as we kind of reassess like where it came from, how like big it sounded, and this is all happening between our eyes. We're not actually saying anything.
Kasum, just in response, arches an eyebrow and pushes the lenses on his face a little bit further up his nose.
And Kajum nods and chooses a different route than she was going on in the first place, and then starts going down that direction. She knows that there's going to be emergency personnel coming, and they come down this corridor usually when there's an emergency of the sort. At least they're supposed to. That's what the training tells us to do. So we're going to take a different route, one that they're not going to be taking.
Sensible.
It is at about this point where, Sidra, you begin to have some situational awareness.
Oh.
Is that out loud?
Yes.
Okay, you hear the realized asset begin to speak.
I am being jostled.
Kasum does not respond verbally, but his eyes get a great deal wider, and he looks much less comfortable than he did before.
Kajum stops, looks at Kasum, is confused by the voice that she heard, because she's looking forward, leading the way down the hallway, and it's just as if somebody made a noise out of nowhere. So she's kind of looking to see where the person that she hasn't taken stock of is.
Excuse me.
Some office somewhere.
Excuse me, I think I'm improperly oriented.
Oh no. Kasum, what's happened? Oh no. This is far too soon.
The asset is awake.
Hello.
Also, I killed an auditor.
Realized asset?
Hello.
Are you mobile? Can you walk?
I believe I am improperly oriented.
Kasum, if you would orient her.
Kasum gently places her on her feet.
Oh. This is different. This is new. All right. Which one are you?
Which one was that directed to?
Both.
We are your treasury bond. We are leaving with you now.
All right.
There... Do you understand the concept of run?
Yes.
Good. We're going to be doing that now.
All right.
And we run.
Okay. As you're running, I assume that Sidra is kind of in the back to start with here.
Yeah, she sort of immediately runs past them and then slows down a bit once she realizes that she doesn't actually know what direction they're going in.
Right. Okay. You're all moving at a pretty high rate of speed here. At one point, the two bond members go around a corner a little bit ahead of Sidra, and just as you're about to kind of come around the same corner, a door that basically is kind of right in front of you, so basically it lets out onto the hallway that you're on, and at the corner of the perpendicular hallway, opens up, and there's kind of one relatively young-looking, bureaucrat monk who's standing there, who kind of just looks out at you with kind of a look of surprise.
Hello. And then I just run past them.
He kind of puts one hand up as if he's about to speak, kind of thinks better about it, looks around, shrugs, closes the door again. And we're going to cut back to Crux and Dale at this point. You guys are coming in towards the entrance. And at this point, you can see that at least some portion of a unit of warrior monks has activated here near the entrance to try to deal with whatever this situation is going on. So you guys are here. There's about 6 total monks here. A few of them, wielding mote discs like we saw a minute ago. A few of them with those hand wrappings. A couple of them with basically elaborate kind of stick or blade weapons that they're holding. And they're all kind of positioned in kind of a strike formation, basically facing inwards at the entrance, as if they're getting ready to move in. So at the moment, you kind of have the drop on them.
Okay. Crux is gonna aim that tiny little gun. Crux and Vale's lenses turn dark, and brilliant flare comes shooting out, zips around like a little firebug, and sticks to one of the monks, and starts emitting even brighter sparks. This is basically kind of a sticky phosphorus flare, designed to mostly to blind, but also to injure whoever it stuck to.
The guy that it hits at first just kind of leans over and swats it like he thinks it's a bug. His hand touches it and it immediately burns, and he kind of pulls it away, looks down, which is a mistake because now he can't see anything. And at this point, just starts flailing around.
So Vale's gonna pull out 2 pistols that are more basically just plasma pistols, and first shoot the flailing guard, and then just kind of start shooting anyone who hasn't turned around yet.
So you start firing off. The flailing guy, he's just toast. He's really not prepared to deal with the situation at all. And you manage to pick off a couple of the other ones. The 3 remaining ones hit the ground and move to scatter quickly. A couple of them are coming right at Crux at the moment. One with a blade weapon, and one with those hand wrappings, and looking very much ready to throw down.
Crux takes a shot at one of them and scurries up the wall onto the ceiling.
Okay.
Vale's gonna lash out Thon's tail and try to wrap it around the other one's legs and yank him.
Okay. So you can manage that. You grab at the legs. You manage to kind of knock this one off balance. Crux, at this point, you manage to catch at what seems to you almost like it's a moment too late, that the last of the remaining individuals here with a rather sizable knife has managed to come up behind where Vale is, and is currently swinging it at a rather problematic speed directly towards Thon's neck. But before you really have a chance to react, you just see that particular monk's head explode. And if you kind of look back along the tracing path, you see Elvin up in one of the nearby trees holding a rather large caliber rifle. He grins and gives you a thumbs up.
So from Vale's perspective, all of a sudden the back of Thon's head and neck are just wet.
Yes.
And Thon kind of turns around and sees the corpse with not much of a head, and looks over where Elvin is and just lifts up, basically makes a C shape with Thon's hand, because there's not really, it's hard to do a thumbs up with the way their fingers are oriented. But that's the equivalent of a thumbs up.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I'm sorry. I thought we were already inside. That's why I said ceiling. But...
Well, there's kind of I assumed basically there's kind of a
canopy.
It's not like a vestibule because it's not walled in, but there's like an entry area with kind of an overhang.
Mm-hmm. It's like an arcade.
Yeah,
maybe?
Something like that, or a canopy, or a
Mm-hmm.
There's definitely outdoor pillars and overhead structures.
Okay.
Yeah, and this is basically the area that they were kind of situated in. So that's what I'm assuming that you kind of are in the underside of.
Yeah, that's exactly what I meant. All right, Alvin. Let's get in there and find out what the hell is going on. Do you need us to find you what do you call it? A screen that you can plug into?
I'm good.
Come on inside. It'll be fun.
No. I mean, he doesn't need you to find anything. He kind of drops down from the tree and kind of prepares to get ready to come in with you.
What I'd like to get is a layout of the interior, and if possible, any heat signatures, any bodies moving around in different directions. Hopefully we'll be able to spot somebody headed out.
Yeah, Elvin's able to bring up kind of a holographic representation of the nearby-ish portion of the building, that he kind of summons up into the air. You do see a number of heat signatures that are kind of further away, but most are either not moving or kind of seem like they're doing something else. And then you see 3 moving at a pretty high speed through some of the nearby quarters, clearly heading towards the entry point that you're at.
Okay. Think that's them?
There's 3. Wasn't expecting 3. But
maybe the 3rd is the package?
That would make things complicated, but...
Yeah, I'd have to ask for a little more at the end of this.
All right. Well, let's make sure those 2 in our package can make it up to us, shall we?
Yeah. And just for kicks, let's make sure there's only 1 at the end of this.
I like a challenge.
Okay, so are you guys... so I didn't quite follow. Are you guys heading in to try to meet up with them, or are you waiting for them to come out?
I think we're going to... If we have a map that we can sort of follow, I think we're going to try and...
meet them in there.
Meet them in there.
Okay. You guys head in then. There's basically kind of, again, I'm kind of not able to summon up the architectural word here, but there's kind of an open area with like a lot of potted plants and waiting areas and kind of, various service windows, all of which are closed at the moment, and carpets and kind of ostentatious artwork and stuff here in the area that you've come into. It is, at the moment that you enter, kind of empty, and you have just enough time to kind of like position yourself before the doors on one side of this kind of double swing doors burst open, and the Treasury Bond and Sidra kind of come running out from them. At this point, you should all be able to get a pretty solid look at one another at about the same time.
Okay. So Thon looks at these 2 treasury, inner and outer treasury, and what is Sidra wearing?
That's a good question. Probably something like a hospital gown.
Mm-hmm. I was thinking like a more elegant, like much nicer material version of a hospital gown.
Yeah.
Right, like silk.
Like a VIP hospital gown, essentially.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So like one of these things does not belong.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So Thon is going to point 2 fingers in the direction of the rushing Bond and Sidra and say, "You have our package."
Kajum looks at Kasum. Josh, do we know who we're supposed to be dropping these guys off with? Or dropping Sidra off with? Nope. But we do know what the location was supposed to be, right?
Yep.
And this is not the location?
It is not the location.
Right.
Sorry, we got bored waiting around out there.
Are you responsible for the explosion?
No.
Nope.
You're not?
That's unfortunate.
Hello.
Hi. So who do you think did the explosion?
We don't have time for this. Let's get to the extraction point. You've complicated measures by coming in here. We need to leave.
You've complicated measures by being late, but I agree.
We are...
Excuse me.
Exactly
I've
on
been
time.
jostled. And then She sort of leans over and vomits a clear stream of nutrient fluid onto the ground. I am having mixed feelings about physical experience at the moment.
Realized asset, it will be okay. Trust us. This will be better for you.
You are the bond.
Let's move. And she kind of tries to hustle everybody out of here. There's no time for waiting.
Yeah, I mean, this is what they came for, so I guess Vale's willing enough to leave unless Crux wants to do anything else.
No. Crux just gives Vale a look and says, bankers, man.
All right. So with that original strike force kind of cleared out, you guys are free to move out the front door, back out in towards the jungle. Pretty soon after you start heading that way, there are some treasury vessels kind of scrambling from the roof and everything to kind of come out and try to hunt you down. But you have enough of a lead, and since you've taken out the group that was immediately situated right outside, you're able to get under the canopy pretty quickly and start moving through the forest area. So that gives you a decent kind of head start in terms of not being spotted.
Mm-hmm.
So on the way, as we're running, Crux turns to Thun's traveling companions and says, so just to be totally clear, we're working for the same party, correct? Which was Galactic Collections LLC.
Mm-hmm.
Is that correct?
To the best of your knowledge, yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
We're all on the same side here.
Gravy.
The question is, who...
I'm sorry, which ones are you?
We're your ride.
Oh, okay.
So they keep calling you realized asset. Is there anything catchier?
And you could use my serial number.
What's that?
62118-Sparrow-D.
Yeah, that's also kind of a mouthful. Don't worry. We'll come up with something for you.
So when she says Sparrow-D, that means there's a little picture of a sparrow that goes in that serial number, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's a character in the old Ardori
Right.
alphabet.
I figured, yeah. That's amazing. Eye, hand, bird going like this.
It's actually just a lot of birds.
So you're able to move through the kind of jungle area here without too much difficulty. You have to kind of dodge and kind of carefully time your movements occasionally to kind of avoid the patrols, but for the most part, you're in a pretty good spot here, and you're able to move through this pretty effectively until you get back to the area where you've parked the thylacine.
Okay. So Vale's gonna say to Elvin, would you get our guest settled on board?
We should really try and figure out who the third party is, though, as soon as we possibly can.
Elvin comes over at this point and kind of puts his paw around Sidra's shoulders. Come on in here, buddy. We'll get you something to drink.
Please don't touch me.
Kind of pulls it back and kind of gives you a funny look and then shrugs and leads you into the ship.
I follow.
Listen, as far as we're concerned, we're about to leave this planet. I don't care who blew up that tower as long as they're not following us. But there is one last thing that we should do before we go. For your benefit and partially for my enjoyment. Probably make it look like you put up a bit of a fight. By which I mean hold still and let me punch you.
Kasum looks over at Kajum. Very slant-eyed.
I thought we were going with. No?
No, that wasn't part of our deal.
Huh.
Sounds like you guys are not very good at negotiating.
Well, as long as the RA is safe, then I think we've done our work.
Cool. So there's no hard feelings, as Crux points the tiny little gun at Kajum.
Well, no. And she palms another one of the motes as the gun is pointed at her. She thinks she could block it, but she's not positive.
Crux fires.
She tries to block it.
I mean, it sticks to the thing, right?
She flings the mote up as it the first burst of light starts to come out of the gun, and I don't know. It would like maybe deflect it and just kind of spin there in the air. Not sure.
Or that might create a strobe
I
effect.
think probably the most likely thing that happens here is that you successfully manage to target the thing. The mote hits it. It kind of causes both to kind of like spin at like an angle, like they kind of like deflect each other's angular momentum in a way that causes it to spin around. Everybody with like normal functioning eyesight here gets basically strobe blasted by this light, and then the disc basically kind of careens off to one side and like sticks in a nearby tree.
Just as Crux fires, Thon drops to the ground, wraps a tail around one of Kajum's legs and yanks it.
Oh no.
Yanked away. Okay, you hit the ground with a serious thud.
By this time, I think Kasum is drawn on Thon. Thon is the other?
Thon is like the gender
neutral pronoun.
Gender neutral pronoun, but it's Vale.
Oh, okay. It's Vale. Okay, right. It's Vale. Yeah.
So Vale was kind of waiting for Crux to shoot because Thon sort of knows how this routine tends to go. And as the strobe kind of goes off and their lenses drop down, Thon's tongue is going to shoot out to try to sort of flick Kazum like between the eyes, and probably also break his glasses.
Oh, my glasses!
I think the way that this probably goes down is that that's largely successful as described, but also he also gets a shot off, which probably just basically gives you a rather severe tongue piercing.
Oh, ow. Ooh.
Also, when the glasses break and the lenses fly off, it's clear that he has red eyes with some sort of circuitry in them.
So I don't know, do they look sufficiently beat up that we can get out of here?
Oh yeah, they're good.
Okay. Let's get out of here.
Crux scampers up the gangplank, the stairway, whatever, and away.
Vale falls up behind Thon and says, "How are doing business with you?" Before they head off.
Oh, sorry. Whatever you mean.
Just Kasum like looks to Kajum like, "Are you whole?" Right, like just checking in.
Yeah. She kips up, gets back to her feet, kind of brushes off the dirt and debris from her robe, and just nods. Her eyes go a little bit squinty though. She feels like something didn't go right here, and she's not quite sure what it was.
So the ship takes off, right?
Mm-hmm.
So as the ship is taking off and Kasum is looking up at it with his red cyborg eyes, he just says, "So we're fucked."
Yeah, there's yeah. I'm sorry, Kasum. And she pats him on the shoulder as she also looks up at the ship.
The Auditor landed with a ship, but isn't going to be leaving.
That's a good point. I hadn't thought of that.
At about this point, some individuals from near the beginning of this whole scenario kind of come around the corner. It's the short gentleman with the staff and the two guards. They run around. They run over towards you, and for once, he seems to have a look of genuine concern on his face. Oh, Art. Did you two get away?
We did.
Oh, this is a very bad situation, he says. We'd better bring you back to the treasury. We can debrief with the superiors as soon as everything's cleared up and we know that nobody else is still on the loose.
Is what have there been casualties?
We think so. We haven't been able to check just how many.
And do we know who it was yet?
No idea.
She looks at Kasum and she slowly smiles and walks with the middle management supervisor guy back to the treasury.
Kasum has just a much slighter smile and follows.
So meanwhile, back on the thylacine, once you guys are kind of settled in and flying, you're going to get kind of an incoming call, basically, from the same frequency that is communicated with you up till now.
Mm-hmm.
Let's put it up.
Yep.
It's voice only. Status of the package.
Secure, alive, breathing, and talking.
Acceptable. Just kind of a long pause.
This is not our specialty. We deal in artifacts and things. We're not slave traders
Or babysitters.
We can discuss the specifics at the.
We're occasionally kidnappers, but
we can discuss the specifics at the rendezvous. Meet at these coordinates in 3 days. Out. Drops the signal.
3 days. What are we supposed to do with it for 3 days?
Cut to the back room here, where I think Elvin is probably attempting to get Sidra to sit down and play something analogous to chess with him at the mess hall table in the back.
She will and does very well, but partway through she'll stop for a second. I think something's wrong. I think I'm missing some data.
We all feel that way sometimes, hon. He makes a move.
I think I'm missing some data.
Okay. Any last thing from Crux and Vale before I cut to the last thing I have?
I think Vale spends a little bit of time trying to figure out how to bandage Thon's tongue and just ends up kind of like sucking on a moist cloth for a while.
Crux is scrolling through some of the latest in ship weaponry, looking for something to add on to the addendum to the contract. something to ask for in further compensation.
Mm-hmm. Cool. And so to kind of close out here, we cut away from the thylacine and onto the bridge of a different vessel, the Martixa, where we see a few of the known members of the crew, the Captain Diedward and the Nasiri combat specialist Adriel, sitting nearby the vessel's radio, and through kind of a tinny speaker, we hear the end of the call that Crux and Vale just got off of, indicating the rendezvous, playing back. As the call drops, they high five. And scene.
That's it this week for the Chimera. We'll be back in 2 weeks, but until then, you can find us online at ChimeraPod on Twitter and Facebook, or at thechimera.space. Also, we recently got an entry on RPG Podcasts, which is a great catalog of role-playing shows with particular attention paid to diversity and inclusion, and you should really go check it out at rpgcasts.com. It's run by Tess from the Mouse Guardians podcast, which is also delightful, and we're proud to be a part of it. And of course, we would love it if you left us a review on Apple Podcasts, or just recommended us to some friends, or even just purchase us some ad time during the Super Bowl, which I'm told is coming up soon. Anyway, thanks for listening, and we will see you next time.
I'll send the description over. I'll paste the description in the Slack so everybody can read it. I'm more proud of Treasury Bond in terms of awful like comic book sci-fi puns than I am of the excess, and I'm pretty proud of that.